timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot! Artest looking, gets it to Birrane. Birrane dribbling, has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it! Oh! He banks it!
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. We got a little bit of a different setup today. Usually we go live, but today I am pre-recording this. I have a very special guest today. As you guys may know him from Twitter, James is it Birrane? I don't want to say it incorrect.
Yeah, you got it right.
Gotcha. So I have James Birrane. Some people call him Yams. Do you prefer to go by Yams?
No, that's kind of a joke. That happened over like Thanksgiving. A lot of the guys at the Liberty line, I was telling them I was making candied yams, and they thought it was very funny. And so I ran with it, and now it's kind of something that sticks. So it's pretty funny. But no, I'm James. Yams is my alter ego, I guess.
Got you. So I wanted to make sure I clear that up
Yeah.
before I address you by the incorrect name today,
That's
James.
hilarious. Yeah.
James, before we get started here today, of course I can let everybody know what you got going on, but it might sound a little bit better coming from you. What all do you have going on right now? Where can people find your content? And, what all do you get into?
Yeah, so all my written work is with the Liberty line. So if you want to read any of this, the stuff that I'm writing, I do a Sixer of the week. So weekly, I'm dropping stuff. I didn't get to do it this week because it was finals, but I had a lot of studying to do instead. But yeah, definitely check out my written work at the Liberty line. And then obviously I do the Pick Swap podcast with Sean Bernard, who I know you're familiar with. He wanted me to say what's up. So
Gotcha.
I do that with him. And then I'm also part of the Process to Progress, which is the Sixers podcast for the Liberty line as well. So any of the stuff you want to catch me on, do it or don't do it. It's okay either way, but that's where I'm at.
Gotcha. And very modest there. Very modest. Yeah. You got a lot of Sixers stuff going on. You're very in touch with the Sixers, which is ultimately why I brought you on here, James. Obviously, you're pretty cool, but we did get here to talk business. The Sixers, right? We're going to get into a lot of the Sixers talk today. So we're going to talk about, the matchup with the Warriors over the weekend, how they, were able to gather that underdog win, and then the complete opposite of a loss against the Memphis Grizzlies last night, which was just kind of disturbing to watch in a sense. After that, we'll get into a few realistic trade targets that me and James have our eyes on in regards to this Ben Simmons talk that just keeps on coming. And then we'll get into a little bit of Eastern Conference talk. We'll talk about some teams that maybe should be selling. Before we get into all of that, I just have a little bit of tidy up work, clean up work here. A little bit of news. So Steph Curry, obviously tonight, 7:30 at Madison Square Garden. He's 2 3-pointers away from breaking Ray Allen's all-time record. It's time for him to make history, right? Like he's not gonna not get 2 3-pointers. Right. It's happening at the Garden tonight. I got just a quick question, and you can, pick it as you will, right? Yeah. LeBron or Steph for your age, for your time watching basketball?
It's LeBron. It's definitely LeBron. But man, there was a small stint of a time where I was anti Steph Curry, and I wish I could go back and change that because he's amazing, dude. And the way that he's changed basketball is something that I wish everyone could find a way to appreciate. But for me, it's LeBron. I mean, he's always been my GOAT, and for me, I've been watching LeBron since I can remember. So it's definitely LeBron for me.
I love that. The only reason I bring it up, and I'm not necessarily on either side, really. I see the greatness in both of them. I'm the same as you. As like when I was younger, I would be like just so anti-LeBron, like just so against him for no reason. Until he won that championship series against the Golden State Warriors, where they came back from 1-3, and won that series. That earned my respect ultimately, and it shouldn't have taken that. He's obviously one of the greatest players of all time, number 1 or number 2 on everybody's list, most likely. And I just used to hate on him for no reason. But that's what greatness does, man. As a bitter Philly fan, I find myself doing that a lot. Other set of news here. Zion suffers a setback in the foot injury recovery. He's only played 85 games compared to 87 games that he's missed, man. And the longer he's out, the more worried I get. I don't know if you know this. I am a Duke fan, so obviously I'm rooting for Zion to be successful, but it's looking bad, man. You have all these rumors about his weight. Yeah. Any thoughts on Zion in that situation in New Orleans there?
I feel bad for him in a lot of ways. Like, obviously, none of us really know exactly what's going on. And who knows what could actually be happening with him. And I feel like he's had a tough time there. Like, he's on his third head coach already. And he was fantastic last year. I think people forget that he was incredible last season when he was on the court. So really for him, I'm hopeful that he gets healthy soon. And that he can come back and be the Zion that we were all really excited for, that garnered the first overall pick. So, and I think he can. I think he will. He's still super young.
Yeah, he is still super young. He's got to get himself into better shape now. Yeah, I saw him the other day, like in a picture on the sidelines. He looked like he was in pretty good shape. So it seems like those pictures with like his weight concerns are like kind of inaccurate. I could be totally wrong. I don't know his weight and all of that, but I'm rooting for Zion. Definitely want to see him back in there. I kind of just wish he never would have got drafted to New Orleans. I just feel like that is like, even when he comes back, that team has not done anything to surround him with something that fits him. It's just kind of weird there. Final, just kind of quick notes here. The Lakers also, it's been rumored by Jake Fisher that they've had internal conversations about moving Russell Westbrook. That trio to their standards has not worked. Any thoughts on that fit out in the LA, man? It's kind of gross to me. I haven't watched any other games in a while, since towards the beginning of the season, just because it's kind of boring. I do not like that fit of those three on the court at the same time at all. And then sometimes they throw Rondo and like just a mixture of like just weird non-shooting players around these guys that aren't shooters, per se themselves. Any thoughts on the Westbrook and the Lakers there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I always end up having the faith, like the same way with Tom Brady, where it was like at first, I don't know if the Bucks are going to be that good. And then they end up figuring it out. We've done this dance with LeBron before. And I think they'll end up figuring it out to some level. But to me, Anthony Davis has to play the 5 for them to be successful. Like, they can't run DeAndre Jordan. Like, DeAndre Jordan shouldn't probably be getting minutes at all. But like, Davis has to play center. LeBron has to then play power forward and then like find some shooting somewhere. Cause like everyone loves THT. I don't know why there's so much of a affinity for him, but
I'd have to look at
I don't know what they're going to do.
Get that, man.
He has like skill. He's definitely a very skillful player, but like to pick him over Caruso or whoever it was said like he's unavailable in trades. It's like, no, he's like, he shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's weird to me. And Caruso is an interesting point there because he's doing very well with Chicago. Yeah. They have one of the best, defensive backcourts in the league there with Lonzo and Caruso. And that's kind of what the Lakers are missing too, just a guy that he's aggressive, he's very athletic, he can play defense. And he can also occasionally hit the three. So they definitely got to figure out something with the shooting. I think you're right there. And of course, you just can't have Dwight Howard. Like Dwight Howard and like Russell Westbrook in the lineup. We thought that, Ben Simmons and Dwight Howard lineup was disgusting. Like, imagine Russ and Dwight, man. So yeah, I'm not too intrigued by that. But I do tend to agree with you. LeBron always seems to figure it out. And a LeBron-led team always seems to figure it out. So we'll see. All right, let's get into the real business here. So we'll start with the Sixers and the Warriors. So it was on Saturday, I believe. The Sixers played the Warriors. It was at the Wells Fargo Center. And they were able to come away with the win against the best team in the NBA. I'm not sure if Phoenix and them have I'm not sure if Phoenix has bypassed them just yet, but definitely a top 2 team in the NBA right now, record-wise. 102-93, held Steph Curry to 18 points. He had 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 for 20 from the field, 3 for 14 from the three-point line. Embiid, 26 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 7 for 16 shooting. James, any quick takeaways from this game? Thoughts coming out of this game?
That the Sixers can be a very competitive team, and that they there is enough there to compete. Obviously, I think in a 7-game series, this is not in favor of the Sixers, but I think they found their identity a little bit in this game. Defensively, they decided that they were not going to let Steph Curry beat them. And obviously, Thibault was the catalyst to that. He was incredible on Saturday night. But the effort from Embiid as well, and then coming in, Maxey did a good job. Danny Green did a good job. Like, a lot of those guys stepped into that role saying, we're not going to let Steph beat us tonight. Let everyone else do the work. And like, Jordan Poole had a great night, and Andrew Wiggins is actually, a very solid NBA player. But they were able to, like, Embiid didn't totally dominate, and they were still able to get, I think, Curry had 10, I think, like a mix of guys. Maxey had 14. Harris had like 15 or 16. So a lot of guys pitched in to keep that, their score up. But to keep the Warriors to 93 points a season low, you can't ask for anything more from them defensively. So I think the biggest thing that I took away was they have an identity. It's defense. And when they lock in, they're a very, very good defensive team.
Yeah. And I agree 100% with that. And, to your point of just, finding that identity, kind of, not getting overwhelmed by the Warriors, because there were points in that game, specifically, you mentioned Jordan Poole with 23 points. He had hit like back-to-back threes on, a few possessions in a row. And I know I was starting to think, God, I think it might have even been during the third quarter where they're like lethal in the third quarter, the Warriors are. And the Sixers didn't get overwhelmed. They didn't get down. They stayed in it. They were able to fight back, get the lead, and ultimately win the game by close to double digits, 9-point victory. So I was impressed by that. You mentioned Tyrese Maxey, and I wanted to get your opinion on this because I know you and Sean have talked about it a lot. But Tyrese Maxey's fit with Joel Embiid, the splits are obvious. Like when Tyrese Maxey plays without Joel Embiid, we saw it last night. Maybe it's not the greatest example in a blowout like that, but 23 points. He's right back over that 20 plus point mark as soon as Embiid's out. And whenever Embiid comes back, the ball seems to gravitate towards him a lot more. It seems to gravitate towards the post a lot more. What are your thoughts on that fit? Do you have any worries? Because there's part of me in the back of my mind that just worries that I hate to say like a similar thing that happened to Ben Simmons and like his mindset when you're trying to score on offense as a guy that is aggressive and attacking in the lane and then playing with a guy that clogs up the lane. So that's my biggest worry right now, is that we're falling into this same thing again, and we're starting to see a trend where, some of us had maybe thought that was just Ben Simmons, right? What are your thoughts on that and just the Maxey and Embiid pairing all together?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little bit to worry about. But I was talking to Sean earlier, and it's like, I think they've only played like 15 games together, 14 games together this season.
Yeah.
So it's a very small sample size. It's definitely a work in progress, and it should be probably like the most important thing that they're figuring out over these coming weeks, because if Maxey is continuing to play the way that he's been able to play, the way the trade targets you're looking at could look entirely different. I think it's kind of like the logic of it makes sense. Like, no Embiid means not a lot of attention in the post, means Maxey can get to the rim a lot easier. That's just logical. That's just the way that basketball works. With Embiid's willingness and ability to score from the outside, I think that they should explore those options in the way Curry plays with Embiid in the two-man game. I think they should kind of explore the Maxey in that two-man game as well, because he can get downhill so quickly, and his speed burst is up there with the best in the league, and he's a great finisher at the rim. So giving him space and a little bit of time, I think, creates a new world for him in terms of scoring. So obviously the numbers are going to go down with Maxey when he plays with Embiid because of the attention that Embiid rightfully draws. But I think this is something that they definitely are working on. And I trust Maxey's work ethic. Not to slander anyone, not to slight anyone. I trust Maxey's work ethic in terms of figuring out how to work it out rather than be stubborn. So there's worry there. It's frustrating to see that they struggle so much when playing together, or not struggle, but Maxey doesn't play as well. So that's where my worry lies, but I think it will continue to get better.
Yeah, and I agree. Like you said, it's not to throw shots, but I do think Maxey, he's already shown an incline to fix things that were kind of an issue last season. And we've seen him take a major jump this season. So I would only imagine that he'll figure it out even more. When we're talking about, that 2-man game with Seth and Joel Embiid, it seems like that is the only thing Doc Rivers knows in the fourth quarter specifically. Thoughts on Doc Rivers and kind of, he seems in my mind like even, I know everybody's complaining about Tobias Harris right now. We're talking about the fit of, Maxey and Embiid. We're talking about Ben Simmons' trade value. But I feel like just this underlying detractor of Doc Rivers, if Tobias figures it out, Doc Rivers will mess it up. If we trade Ben Simmons and gets a quality return, Doc Rivers will mess it up. And, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Doc Rivers in, just overall, but specifically since he's gotten to the Sixers, and any differences or similarities that you've seen, with him in the past.
So it's a very funny story because I had to really heavily backtrack because during the coaching search, I have been on record of saying that I thought Doc Rivers is the most overrated coach in the NBA and one of the most overrated of all. He has one championship. He had 4 Hall of Famers on one roster. And he never made it back. He's never even been back to a championship. So there's a lot there for him. He's not a good playoff coach. I think he's fantastic in harboring a great culture with young guys. I think he does a great job. I think one of the best things for Maxey is to be with Doc Rivers and Sam Cassell specifically as well. Cassell. I love Sam Cassell, but when we're looking back, if they had a shot at Ty Lue, I would 100 times out of 100 take that. I don't care about pedigree. I don't care about reputation. I would rather have Ty Lue than Doc Rivers. He lacks creativity offensively. Just even watching the Grizzlies, and I think this might fall in a little bit with roster construction, but they don't get downhill. They don't have sets that they run that always work or give you a shot to always work. How will you struggle as an NBA team with a 2-3 zone for almost 2 full years with Doc Rivers? It doesn't make sense. Or even with Brett Brown, how as an NBA team do you struggle against the 2-3 zone? You've been playing against it probably since elementary school. You should figure out how to break a 2-3 zone. So there's definitely, I have a lot of underlying concerns. I thought he did a great job on Saturday against the Warriors with Matisse and matching minutes and making the right decision of keeping him in the game when Matisse in the game when he was in foul trouble. But he does a lot of little things right. But I think at the end of the day, I'm not confident in his ability to coach a championship team. And that's a tough reality to come to as a Sixers fan right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brett Brown, and it just almost feels like it's like Brett Brown 2.0. It's very similar, the things that we're complaining about, adjustments. Even in this game against Memphis last night, and it's why this team has so much question marks, and why Doc Rivers has so many question marks as well, is because you come out, you beat the best team in the NBA on Saturday, and then you come out and you get smoked. And I know Embiid didn't play. I know Seth Curry didn't play. And this is another conversation. Maybe we can just move to the Grizzlies game here. Yeah. Tobias Harris, I know everybody's talking about the contract, and I was kind of trying to, be optimistic with him. He's coming back from COVID, this and that, but we're seeing the similar things once again that we have seen throughout his time here that we get pissed off about. It's this indecisiveness, not shooting the ball, not being aggressive. When you look out on that court last night, Tobias Harris is the only max player that played in that game last night. The only max player that played in that game. And there were people complaining about Jaren Jackson's contract. He's making $26 million a year, something like that after the extension over the offseason. This man, Tobias Harris, makes $36 million a year. And he looked totally outmatched by Jaren Jackson Jr., which, mind you, Jaren Jackson Jr. is this athletic phenomenon, and he has, incredible touch. He can shoot the ball. Overall, he is a very overwhelming matchup for Tobias Harris. I get it. But where is the dog at? We talked about Ben Simmons looking like a deer in headlights in the playoffs. And it looks like as soon as you ask for Tobias Harris to make this team his, right? Joel Embiid's out tonight. He's got some bruised ribs, man. Can you handle it for one night?
Against the Grizzlies.
Yeah, against the Grizzlies without John Morant, right?
Yeah.
And you come out and there's just nothing there. So I want to know your thoughts on Tobias. I know over at the Pick Swap podcast, you guys have talked about moving him an awful lot. What are your thoughts on Tobias? How is there a way to fix him on this team? Like, what can we do with him?
Yeah, I think so. It's difficult because Tobias is really like he's very solid in a lot of the things that he does. He's a good rebounder. He's a good defender now. He's statistically a good shooter, but doesn't take the volume that you need. The concern for Tobias to me is like I think he would be good anywhere he goes. I don't think he's great anywhere he goes.
Yeah.
And right here, especially with this fit alongside Embiid, like I just don't know that it's right. And like again, we got to realize the management has changed like basically 3 times. Like since Embiid's been good, like since the Sixers have been good, like management has switched from like 3-4 drastic different ways of looking at a roster, like the outlook of a season. So like Tobias was not different. Doc Rivers wasn't even Daryl Morey's decision. So like Tobias frustrates me because I want so much more from him. I want him to be so good because I really like Tobias. I think him as a person, great dude. He's awesome as a leader, like in the organization. I think he does a great job in the community. Great job. Like it's hard to hate on a guy like that, and not that I would hate on him, but I think it's more about the fit and more about what like who Tobias is as a player. He's almost 30 years old. Like he's not going to change now.
Right.
Like there's really not much more. Like he's probably on his last big contract. Good for him for getting his money. Like I think it's hard for like nobody would turn down $36 million a year.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's not his fault.
So like it's frustrating because I on nights like that, and even nights with Embiid, like I think the last time he scored 25, I was like, oh my God, Tobias scored 25. Like he's a max player that should be doing that regularly, or not every night, but like every couple nights, and we haven't even seen it. Like he seems like peak at like 18, 19, and like it's just not good enough. His spots where he scores from aren't like cohesive with this team. So personally, I think for the Sixers' sake, it's necessary to look at better options or different options. Because even if you get some financial liberty going into next summer, like if you just have some relief and you have some cap space that you can play with, I think that gives Daryl Morey a better shot of building a championship caliber roster. Because right now they just don't have it.
Yeah. And, that was a good point. I think it's something I forgot to mention myself is, one of my takeaways from that Warriors game is like, it's exactly what you said to start the show there. It showed that they can compete with anyone, but it also showed me that there is no way that we can pencil them in as contenders right now because they show the same limitations every game. And sometimes they can really emphasize their strengths and go out there and beat a Warriors team. But then, on an off night or just a regular night, you could call it, they go into Memphis and just get smoked by a team that's just more aggressive, more physical.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what it comes down to. And with Tobias, I guess what I want to ask you, I know you kind of hit at it, but do you think if Tobias got moved, is he a player that could ever average like 23 points? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
When I knew Ben Simmons wasn't going to be playing this year to start the season at least, I thought maybe this is Tobias's chance to like eclipse like a 22 point per game or 23 points per game mark. He'd have the ball in his hands more, I thought, and it's just not the case. He kind of shrinks himself in a sense.
Yeah, I think that we were definitely on the same page there. Like at the beginning of the year, I remember saying to Sean, like, dude, he could average 22, 23, 24. Like, we're going to need that Tobias. And
we need it.
He looked like he was locked in, and like, I really don't know what it is because he's kind of falling back, like you said, falling back into those habits of, not taking open shots. And he's gotten like, there's some nights where he's better at it. Like against the Warriors, he came out, made an open three off a catch and shoot. Like those are the type of things you need from Tobias. I really don't feel like you're asking that much of him, but he lacks like the athleticism to hang with other fours, and he doesn't have the floor spacing. Like, and that's kind of the thing. I think if he had one or the other, like if he had the volume shooting with his like, he's athletic enough, but like he's not bouncing out of the gym. You're not really throwing lobs at him on a pick and roll. But if he could space the floor at like an elite level or a higher level, that would negate the lack of athleticism.
Yeah.
Or if he was really athletic and shot the way that he does, that would negate the shooting. But he
Yeah.
doesn't really have either one. He's kind of just in the middle at those two things. And those two things are really important to like a modern day four in the NBA. So there's some fundamental flaws in who Tobias is as a player, but he's never going to change. So like, that's why I think as a fit and like as what he is, he might be better suited elsewhere to just give you that 16 to 18 a night and be Tobias Harris in a place that better suits him being Tobias Harris.
Yeah, and it's so funny you mentioned like the athleticism, because that's what I think every time he like blows one of those like drop in layups. Like that is like the one, like I know everybody gets pissed off about the, non-shot taking, sometimes they'll be wide open at the three and decide to dribble into like traffic. Yeah. But like my biggest thing is those like chip shots in the paint, especially in the playoffs against Atlanta, just missing layups. Like, and that's all athleticism. You have like John Collins and Clint Capella out there, athletic as hell, jumping around you. Same thing last night. Jaren Jackson, just an athletic freak. Steven Adams in the paint. He can't do anything with that. And, you hit on something there that made me think, because I've seen Niang this season, right? He's like trying to drive in the lane. He's using the floaters. He's not afraid to shoot the three-pointer. And it's like if Tobias Harris just had that confidence. And it's like the same thing that we've said. It feels like this is like a rerun of like so many players that we go through in Philadelphia, especially the Sixers, of if they had this person's confidence, then they would be this good. We've said this about Ben. We've said this about other players. But I don't know. I agree with you on the other end as well. As like Tobias is just a great person. Like part of it, this dude is like so nice. Like I put it on Twitter because I ordered, a Spectrum jersey, and it was Tobias Harris's Spectrum jersey. And like it got shipped to a different house, and like I tagged him in the post, like kind of just complaining to Sixers shop. And so he DMs me and he's like, "Bro, I'll hook you up. Like, what's your address?" Like literally offers to just send me the jersey. You know what I mean? Like he's just such a nice guy. And it's like I can't sit here and slander him or disrespect him, but you just simply got to do better. I think that's the best way to put it. Like, obviously, like you said, he's close to 30 years old. He is what he is. But at least do that to the fullest extent, right? Like if you're 18 to 20 point guy, get that every time. Get us 18 to 20 points every single time, not 14, 15, and then sometimes 22. We want that 18 to 20 every time. Consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough because like Harris has had a lot of good moments here too. Like we've had he's been a part of this team. Like as short of a time as he's been there, it's been a really formidable couple years with him here, and like the roller coaster he really is now when you look at it, like one of two standing. When you think about this team, like, or maybe you add Furkan into that too. So like maybe
you can add
one of three. Like so it's hard to like that breakup as well. If it's, I don't know if it is impending. I don't really know what their plan is, but if you think about what's available, if you are able to move him, like I don't know how long you can hang on to him if there's a better fit for a better price out there.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's like there's no way Daryl Morey isn't at least listening, to see if there's anything out there that anybody inquiring. And I thought something that was interesting before CJ McCollum had like the collapse lung, rather than Ben for CJ McCollum, Tobias was something that interested me because CJ McCollum, I know everybody kind of shits on him a little bit, but he at least does it consistently. He's going to get you 20 to 23 points. Like that's who he is. That's who he's been his whole career, even back to college days. So I think that's what you're going for there is like that consistent second scoring threat. Because even Seth, he's inconsistent at times. Like everybody else on the team, really. So you're looking for Tobias for consistency, which he's just not providing. The other thing that I wanted to point to from the Memphis game. Only 4 3-pointers made for the Sixers. It's their lowest of the season, obviously. It's the fourth. It's tied for the third lowest during this season altogether in the entire NBA. And they only took, I think, 22 3-pointers total. They're actually 23rd in the NBA in all-around 3-pointers made. How can they fix this? Is this Doc Rivers? Like, is this like Embiid didn't play last night, so it's not Embiid clogging up the lane. What is there a way to fix this, or do we just not have what is capable?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the only time they get open threes is when Embiid is playing and he passes it out, and someone's open because he's getting double teamed. So, it's bad, and it's something that like I don't know how the Sixers have lagged so far behind, and like the movement of the modern NBA. But literally since the start of like the Curry era, Steph Curry, that is, like there's you haven't had those guys that come in and like that's when you talk about a Buddy Hield and what if you could swap that and like that's a whole different conversation. But like if Tobias Harris, if you swap it for a guy that takes 10 3-pointers a game, like is making 4 out of every 9.7 he takes per game, like that changes the way your team looks entirely. And those shots are going to come every night. He's been like a career 40% shooter, talking about Buddy Hield. And I don't know. There's the issue I see. There's no one that creates their shot on the perimeter. Like Tobias doesn't do it. Maxey is starting to do it. He had a really nice like sidestep 3-pointer last night, which was like nice to see him reach into the bag a little bit. But like there's no one else that does it. Like Furkan's been in a huge slump. Niang only really catches and shoots. Danny Green is like only catches and shoots. Seth Curry is the only one that can do it occasionally, but like he didn't play last night. So I think it was a cultivation of a lot of the where they get their 3-point shots, like Curry and Embiid's presence were gone last night. So aside from that, they don't like Shake is the only guy that comes to mind of like someone that shoots off the dribble like ever.
And he's very spotty as well lately. So he's been playing all right, I guess, in the last couple of games. And you mentioned Korkmaz. He's 2 for 17 from 3-pointers for 3-point shooting in December, 29.5% on the season. Terrible, man. And, he started so hot. And, this is kind of something that I wanted to ask you as well. At what point, in some of these situations like last night, do you go to – and I know Cork had 12 points, so maybe last night isn't the greatest example. When do you start giving Isaiah Joe more opportunities in that situation as a shooter? And then vice versa. I know Drummond's played well, but like specific times like last night, and maybe it's not even taking Drummond out. I don't know how you would have done that against Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. But I thought Charles Bassey, when he came in, matched up decently with Jackson just for his size and athleticism. And he was like the only person that can compare to him. When does Doc start considering these guys, or does he at all?
I mean, I think he should. I actually recently wrote about Furkan potentially like getting his minutes cut a little bit because of how bad he's been. And like, I love Furkan. Like I have a real affinity for him. But Isaiah Joe gives you a bomber. Like Isaiah Joe will shoot. And from what we've seen, he's a good shooter. He's a volume shooter. He's a guy that can shoot from anywhere. And I actually expected him to be a little bit more of the rotation coming into this year. And especially on a night like last night, like you're already kind of shorthanded. You're getting your ass beat like very early on. Like they were down by 20 like early. So I don't know why he doesn't get a run. I think Charles Bassey has a chance to be a really good NBA player going forward, like a very solid backup big. Athletically, he's the only one, like you said, that could hang. Great shot blocker, really good rebounder. Like a lot of the things that the Sixers miss in those games, defensively, he kind of picks up that slack. So I think like Drummond is going to be the backup center all year. And he's very good. Like he's a very good backup center. But like I think Bassey, depending on what happens going into next year, like could be an option as your backup center. I think he has that amount of skill. It's just amount of the experience. So I think soon is the answer. I don't know when, but potentially soon.
I got you. And that's actually an interesting thought because at some point I thought maybe, Paul Reed. I know Paul Reed's more of a 4 as well, but I thought that maybe he could slide. But it seems like Bassey is like kind of taking him out of the equation. Drummond most likely won't be here next year. He's going to get a nice contract after, the positive signs that he's shown this season. So Bassey is interesting. And, I guess that's what I'm kind of asking or suggesting there for Doc is if we can see it from the outside, like recognize it. You know what I mean? Like if we're playing the Bucks, Bassey's an athletic guy. I know he's young. He might do some stupid fouls, but in a night where you're totally dwindled down on your bench, you don't have Embiid, you don't have some of your starters, go to an athletic guy like that. Let him get his learning humps under him, you know what I mean? And go at it with a guy. We saw him block Giannis straight up. We saw Paul Reed block Giannis straight up. And like last night, I saw him block Jaren Jackson straight up. So just like noticing it sooner, you know what I mean? Like it's always like he's like really slow to adjust. And it's like that's why you see like these late comebacks all the time because they finally make the adjustments by the fourth quarter. And then a lot of the time it's just too late. But I don't know. Doc, like I said, man, he's that underlying detractor that I think even if they figure out the other detractors like a Tobias Harris inconsistent, Ben Simmons not playing, Doc Rivers is always going to be there to just let you know that this we won't win, right? Like, and I forgot to touch on your Ty Lue point earlier as well, because I thought that was a great point. I was totally against Ty Lue at the time, and I feel like a moron for it. Obviously, he's done a much better job with the Clippers than what Doc did in the recent years, especially in the playoffs when you're talking about Kawhi Leonard being out for most of that playoff run, getting the most out of Paul George. You know, he would have been the knockdown candidate. I think he would have been the guy that could, you know, kind of figure this team out. And it makes me wonder, you know, did they ever interview him? Did they bring him in? You know what I mean? I don't think they did, but I definitely wish they would have.
Yeah, like seriously, and like I don't know. It's also like it's hard to say, but like Doc has had issues with players. Like him and Blake Griffin don't speak. Him and Paul George, for whatever reason, it might be, don't speak. Like, and the minute he left, like Paul George is like, thank God I can finally play like myself again. Like we have multiple accounts of like players being misused, players having their relationships with him being cracked, and I think he's a very good guy. Like I think Doc means well, but like I don't know, man. It's
like stuck in his ways.
Yeah, I think he's very stubborn, for better or for worse. And at the end of the day, I think like if the Sixers, in a hypothetical, if they were to fire him, he's on the open market for 10 minutes before he gets a call. Like he's not, someone else is going to pick him up. He's that type of caliber coach. But when you're talking about a top coach in the NBA, like there's a lot of other guys I'd rather have than him right now.
Yeah, just, you know, when you talk about innovation, that's what comes to mind. And you mentioned it, creativity. That's what it comes down to. So just, you know, Sixers as a whole, before we move on to the Ben Simmons topic here with the trade targets, overall thoughts on the Sixers so far. You know, obviously we had the blowout last night. Hopefully Embiid, Seth are back in the next matchup. I think it's against Miami. Yeah, so Miami. Thoughts going into the next part of the season, and I guess a introductory question to the next segment. Do you think it's becoming an urgent situation to move Ben in order to get some help for these guys?
So I've been like fairly optimistic this whole year. It's really hard to like gauge them because of the fact that like they spent a week and a half to like the better part of 2 weeks without Embiid, and really this is all, you know, the only way they have a chance is with Joel. So that was a difficult part to go through. And then it's also hard to like rank them because of that as well, because it was hard to know exactly what they are. Since him coming back, they've looked good. When he misses games, they're terrible because that's how much they need him. In terms of like urgency, I think there definitely is some, because like at this point we've come to the conclusion they've broken up. They're just still living together. And like the divorce papers have been basically signed. Just, you know, which Ben's trying to find an apartment somewhere. Like that's the situation they're in right now. So I think for the betterment of the team, in terms of just having another player that would play, would help if Ben is gone soon. But I don't think that they should budge on their asking price. Like you only get to make this deal one time. You only get to trade your number 1 overall pick one time. You better make it count. Like you can't screw this one up. So I think for Moore to be stubborn in his ways is the right thing right now. But if the deal is there, you gotta go get it soon. But like again, I think there's gonna be a lot of movement on a lot of different planes, and I think they have the chance to improve their roster one way or another.
Yeah, and you know that was kind of the thing that I was looking at too. Is like there are other ways that you could improve the roster now. You know, if it's not a trade for a superstar, then I'm obviously not including Maxey or Thibault, like in any of those like side trades. Because one, you want to keep those young players, and two, if you're not keeping them, you want to use them as leverage in a deal with Ben in order to get the best possible return. When I'm looking around the league, you know, the Indiana Pacers put like Karis LeVert on the market. Karis LeVert, I look at him, he's having a down season. He's shooting like under 30% from the field. He's been injured once. He has a major injury history. But I look at a guy like that, like you could probably get him for a lot less than what he's actually worth right now. And I think he could be a nice plug and play from the bench unit, or, just another scoring threat, like consistency. So I'm looking around the league for guys like that, to where maybe you can trade like I hate to throw Shake in there. Maybe you can trade like a Shake in a draft comp for Levert or something like that. Or, Cam Reddish in Atlanta, they're talking about trading him if anybody offers a first-round pick. I know that doesn't necessarily count for the Sixers, since their first-round picks won't be that valuable. But, just those littler pieces that you can still move, but they would be monumental role players in a situation like this. So I am looking at some of those side avenues to make this team better as well, just because I know that this Ben situation, I know the rumors are picking up, but I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know about you, but I just get lost in them. It's like all mixed together in my head of like what I've heard, the offers that I've heard about. And some of these offers just aren't even true. You know what I mean? Like some of the rumors just are simply not true. So let's get into the Ben talk. I do want to, get an updated look at the targets here. Let me get that off the screen. So as you guys view the screen here, we got a top 5 list of targets. So in the blue is going to be my picks for the top 5, and then in the red we have Yams up there. So my editor put the Yams on there. We didn't know which thing you would prefer, James. So we'll add it on there. But Yams picks are over there in the red. So what we can do here, James, we can just kind of go through the list and talk about that fit, why you want that player for this team. So I'll start, with your number 1. So you mentioned Damian Lillard. The first question I want to ask you is, despite everything that he said out in the open, do you think that there is still a possibility that, even with, the reports coming out that the Blazers are not trying to move him, is there any, fluidity there that you think that trade could happen?
Like in all reality, probably not. The reason I put him number 1 though is that like any like inkling that the Sixers have the best like available package that they could send anywhere. So I think if there were something to happen, I think that would be if you're gonna have a wholesale, if you're gonna do everything to get one player, if you're gonna put all your chips in the middle for one guy, like I think it has to be Dame in terms of fit, in terms of who he is, his stature. He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Like you buy into that. You do that. So I don't think that that's a realistic one in terms of, I guess I should have a top 5 realistic trade
like right
targets,
now though, like it is like, I would agree with you in a realistic sense of if this plays out on the long-term effect. So like I think like it potentially goes into the off season.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm looking at, is like if the Blazers are bad again and he wants that extension and they don't want to pay him because they want to rebuild, and they're like, okay, it's better to just move on. Yeah. If that's what they're waiting for, first of all, if that's what the Sixers are waiting for, which could be it, like they might just wait the Blazers out. Who knows? Yeah. But like if that becomes the reality where the Sixers don't get a deal through this season and they're waiting for next offseason to really kind of have that flash rebuild, Damian Lillard's the guy.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you there. And I want to ask you, and the reason I don't have, just for clarity, I don't have Damian Lillard just because I think there are some more players on the market that could become available in my mind, just based on rumors and what I would, like to see them go after as well. But if Damian Lillard's on the market, I would send everything. That's what I wanted to ask you. Where does the line stop? Do you draw it at Maxey, Thibault, or you send them all? It does not matter.
You're probably – I mean, you got to just send them all. Yeah. Like, as much as I love those guys, I'm a huge fan of all of them. And like, I'm really excited for their careers in the NBA. But, if you're moving on from that to get a potential upgrade at that position that's a top 3 at his position in the league – that fits perfectly with Joel and does everything that the Sixers have wanted, you have to just do whatever you got to do.
And I 120% agree with you. And before this, or like maybe after that stretch, with Maxey tearing it up, I might have, been like blindfolded and said like, I'm not including Maxey. But no, as this season plays out and as I see the truth behind this roster, Damian Lillard would solve so many issues, and you can just plug and fill in, players. You can find a wing guy. Like I mentioned, there's side pieces to be had in the buyout market and other avenues. So that's definitely something I could explore. My number one is going to be Jaylen Brown, and I know you have Jaylen Brown number 2 on your list, so you're obviously very high on him as well. Which Jaylen Brown, I think he's averaging 21 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal a game, 46% shooting, 37% from 3. What does that fit look like? Because, like, in my mind, like, I do get the Damian Lillard fit. I guess, as I've been thinking about this Sixers team, I have been gravitating more towards a wing, and just having that consistency, scoring, defending on the wing, similar, to what we wanted out of Ben. Jaylen Brown, talk to me about that fit and, kind of why he's your number 2 on the list there.
Yeah, I mean, Jaylen Brown, I think, is one of those guys that, given the opportunity, like in an upgraded amount of opportunities on the offensive end, I think his scoring numbers could go up. But like you said, the defensive versatility that he brings, I think the underrated part of Ben not being around and Ben, kind of what he did was understated. It gets brought back a little bit with Jaylen Brown. He's a very, very solid, strong wing defender, that a good defensive presence. And I think in terms of his scoring, when you're talking about down the stretch, a guy that can handle the ball, a guy that can get his own shot, and a proficient number 2 scorer alongside Embiid, I think he fits really well. And as I think the way I put him at 2 is like, it has to be a 3-team deal for me. I can't see Ben in Green. It would make me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, maybe something with Indiana or something like that, where Sabonis goes to Boston and Ben goes to Indiana or something. I don't know if that's, something that's possible.
I saw a 3-team deal where Fox ends up in Boston, Ben ends up in Sacramento, and Brown ends up here.
I would be 100% fine. 100% fine with that.
Yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy with Jaylen Brown because if you talked about this a year ago, you could probably, talk somebody into accepting that trade one for one, then for Jaylen Brown. And it's now you see these mock trades and it's like the Sixers have to add something to get Jaylen Brown, which is just crazy where we're at.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the length and the athleticism. And I think that's something, without Ben, the Sixers completely lack. We talk about wing athleticism. Tobias Harris, he obviously lacks it. And just getting that type of athleticism, I think, could change the game for the Sixers. We have a bunch of these, I hate to call them short guards, but, Tyrese Maxey, he is athletic, but he's not finishing over top of the rim, over top of people. Seth Curry obviously is not the most athletic guy in the world. Danny Green is limited by far. So, there is a lack of athleticism overall with this team that I would love to see fulfilled by Jaylen Brown. Number 2 on my list, I have SGA. So I don't know how realistic this is because I don't know what the hell the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing. So I don't know what their overall plan is. But I do look at them, whether it's a 3-team deal and Ben Simmons goes somewhere else, or if Ben Simmons just went straight there as a package for SGA or something like that. I do think Ben Simmons, it could kind of fit with where they're going, just getting him back to where he needs to get to with his play, kind of figuring himself out on the offensive end, no pressure. And then you get SGA back with Doc Rivers, who he was with as a rookie on the Clippers. Obviously, he's something that the Sixers have been missing as well. Any thoughts on SGA? What are your thoughts on him as a player and his fit, what it would be with the Sixers?
I love SGA. I'm a big SGA fan. I think he's really, really good at what he does. Yeah. And I think, again, he's cerebral in the pick and roll. So if he were to end up here, it's something that you have to maneuver around because the Sixers don't pick and roll that often. Yeah. Embiid doesn't roll that often. But he's a guy that in a pick and roll setting, I think creates so much for the people around him that, you center an offense around that. So it would be a little bit of a switch up, I think, in a good way. But I love SGA. His contract's a nightmare going forward, and he's going to make so much money in this offseason. So that's why I don't have him on my list, because I just don't know if they're willing to take on that massive contract.
I got you. So SGA, 6'6" point guard. You mentioned all his capabilities, and just coming in the 20+ points. He does shoot under 30% from 3, which I know he's been in and out
last year though. Did he shoot well? I'm pretty sure he shot well last year, closer to 40%. I don't know what's going on with him this year, but I'm pretty sure he shot well last year. I was just looking at this the other day. I wrote an article, so I think I have it right, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try to find it right now. If you do find it, just let me know. But
yeah, it's he shot 41.8% last year on
wow, yeah,
almost 5 attempts a game. So like he has it in him.
Yeah, so then that's definitely a good sign. But that's why he's number 2 on my list. I think the youth that you would be getting back is a prospect. Ultimately, you wouldn't lose so much with Ben. Now, obviously, SGA he isn't held up to that standard like Ben is, but right now he is a better player, at least offensively. So it could solve a lot of issues for the Sixers. Number 3 on my list, I have DeJounte Murray, which I know you have him number 4 on your list. So talk to me about DeJounte Murray, what he's done this season. He's had a hell of a season so far and probably has increased his value to somewhere where we don't want to see it. But, what are your thoughts on him and his fit and what it would be with the Sixers?
Yeah, another guy I'm a huge fan of. Like that dog mentality we talked about earlier that like Tobias kind of lacks, and like it seems like this team kind of lacks sometimes. That's not going to fly with him. He's a dog through and through. He's been one of my favorite players in the league for a couple of years now. You're talking about perimeter defense, really lengthy, strong, aggressive defender. If you're talking about backcourt partner, like very, very solid in terms of if you want to pair him with Maxey. He does a lot of things that Maxey doesn't do. He's growing as a shooter. He's another guy that is a gym rat, has been improving every season. And you have a little bit of youth in there as well. He's a younger guy. He doesn't make it too much money. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Murray for a lot of reasons, and I think he'd be great here. I also think people will love him here.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, the culture aspect and, his kind of dog mentality. You can kind of see that in the way he plays. He's not afraid of the moment. And, I 100% agree with you. He's another, kind of lanky, taller point guard that could fill that bill and averaging over 8 assists and 8 rebounds. So he would fill in that facilitation that we're losing with Ben, as well as the rebounding that we've been struggling with as well. So that would be a very interesting one. You also got Bradley Beal up here at number 3, which, he's another one where I'm like, maybe long term, maybe in the off season. He is refusing to sign that extension with Washington. Yeah. So that's what, kind of changes my thinking there. What are the thoughts with Bradley Beal as far as a realistic shot, and then just that fit with this team as well, where Bradley Beal is another one of those targets where you probably have to give up either a Maxey or a Thibault or both with Ben.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks ago, if you asked me to do this, I probably wouldn't have had him on my board. But since all those rumors came out and he was like, I'm not comfortable signing a deal yet here, which is weird because he's been so like loyal to them and up until now, and now they're having like their best season that they've had so far. Like, I don't know, but you can see that like Washington's trying to build something like with Dinwiddie, with Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell. Like they're starting to get into that different style of play. And obviously Brad Beal is going to dominate because he's that good offensively. But if they wanted to, if they're saying Brad doesn't want to stay here, he might want to go win somewhere. And we're not really in the winning position right now. We're not going to sell everything to try to win, but we could end up with Ben Simmons in a game on a big contract and he'll stay here for a while. I think there's a realistic shot at that. That could be a case, but like you said, it might be longer term. It might be through this year or at least like closer to the deadline if that were to happen. But like just in terms of player, Brad Beal is amazing. He was up in 30 point per game area. If you can get in exchange for Ben a 30 point per game score, by all means, you got to do it.
Yeah, you have to do that 100%. So I'm definitely with you on Bradley Beal. And honestly, with those rumors, I could do with having him on my list here. I'd probably take De'Aaron or Brandon Ingram off, which, moving along, Brandon Ingram, he's a very controversial piece, obviously, because, the well-known reasons of the Sixers passing him up in the draft in the first place. I get the concerns with Brandon Ingram. I do my due diligence on Twitter, reading around what people's thinking. As far as, his similarities to Tobias Harris, where he operates on the floor. But, overall, when I'm thinking about value and what you can get back for Ben, I know it might not be the greatest fit. And I also don't think that De'Aaron Fox is the greatest fit, which I'll get your opinion on that as well. But the thing with Brandon Ingram, at least he provides scoring, 20-plus point night guy. He provides length at the wing spot. He can play defense against a lot of different positions. So I do have a little bit of interest there with Brandon Ingram. He's averaging close to 23 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, shoots about 36% from the three. So I look at him. It's not obviously my favorite. And honestly, I would take Damian Lillard. I would take Bradley Beal over him, obviously. What are your thoughts on Brandon Ingram, that fit, and, him overall as a player?
Yeah, I'm not a huge BI fan, to be honest. I think if that was the swap for Tobias in any sort of way, like, I would be very happy about that. But I think that'd be a great switch, or a great swap. But I don't know. I think for Ben, that seems like a really big downgrade. Whereas, like, you get those 23 points from all these other guys, and he seems around. Like, he's never really impressed me in terms of, like, energy, or that, just like, he's just kind of there. Maybe it's
not
playing in New Orleans. Yeah, and maybe just because he's been playing in New Orleans. But he's a very talented, skilled player, and a versatile scorer. So, like, I wouldn't mind having him on the Sixers at all. But for Ben, I think that would be kind of like the low ball for them.
And so basically in a deal like that, you would want, like maybe a piece attached with Brandon Ingram, like something.
Josh Hart.
Josh Hart, yes. I was trying to think of somebody. That is the perfect piece right there, man.
Yeah.
Josh Hart would solve a lot of issues, as like just that role player, but he's like a very high, quality role player.
Yeah.
As we finish up here, I think this is the last player on the list to go through. De'Aaron Fox, right? I mentioned it earlier. I don't think he's the greatest fit, but once again, when I'm looking at quality of return and talent as far as compared to Ben, I do like De'Aaron Fox a lot. Shooting 26.5% from three this season. Yeah. It's never been his strong suit, but at least, he gets them up. But thoughts on De'Aaron Fox, that fit? He kind of seems eerily similar to Tyrese Maxey, but, at a higher level, I guess you could say, higher volume. What are your thoughts on De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah, I think that when you talk about the fit, it's a little bit rough. Like, you definitely have to move Maxey off the floor. Right. Just because they play essentially the same type of basketball, getting up and down the floor. But when thinking about Maxey and all the things that we love about Maxey, I think are kind of heightened with De'Aaron Fox.
De'Aaron Fox, yeah.
Last year, it's going to be something I think he probably battles with throughout his entire career. But in a situation where he's maybe getting a little bit more open 3-pointers and catch and shoot, like with Embiid, all the attention that he draws, like game-breaking speed when you're talking about him getting up and down the floor, getting those easy buckets that we talked about earlier, and getting to the rim at a capacity that we don't have right now, aside from Maxey. But, like, Fox is an established player that's been able to do this for a couple of years now, so the confidence is there. I think getting him out of Sacramento is like step number one into rehabilitating his jumper, and I think that's probably on the horizon as well. I think Fox is going to be on the move probably by the end of the year. So that's why he's on my list.
Gotcha. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask you about Fox as we finish the show up here, because I know I've kept you over time here. We'll finish up with, just Portland. I wanted to talk about Portland, Sacramento, Indiana, Boston, kind of their situations right now. And, you mentioned De'Aaron Fox, although, I know you probably follow Zach, who covers the Kings as well. He, I pay attention to what he puts out, and basically the Kings have come out. Their management says they don't want to move Fox. But in reality, if you look at their recent drafts, it seems like they're stacking up guards, to replace Fox. You talk about Davion Mitchell, who they just recently drafted very high. Who's a quality guard, but they got a plethora of guards there. Tyrese Halliburton, another high pick. Yeah. When we look at Sacramento, who has lost 3 in a row, they're 11-17. They fired their head coach already. Do you just sell everything, right? Like, do you just ship, or do you try to keep Fox and get Hield? Who it seems like they've been trying to move him for years now, and they cannot get it done. Bagley, Harrison Barnes, those guys of the world. What are your thoughts on the Kings? Should they just blow that entire thing up, or would you try to build around Fox or try to build around any of those guys?
I mean, there's a lot of things that are just terrible with that organization. It seems like they just don't have a direction at all.
Yeah.
But, like, you drafted Halliburton. they're very fond of, who I like. I like Halliburton a lot, but they're
I do
like
too.
more fond of him than Fox. And then Davion Mitchell was a lottery pick as well. So you only have so many spots in the starting lineup for guards, especially smaller guards like Mitchell and Fox. So I don't know. I think for them, it's probably best to do like maybe a step back again. I don't know. Like they've already been down there for so long.
Like what can you do? It's like they tried rebuilding after DeMarcus Cousins, and it's like
work. And
it didn't work.
Like, I don't know. Like maybe you try to move Fox for like if you're talking about Miles Turner and you think that like he's a good piece to build around. I don't know. Like there's a lot of like, and the Pacers as well. Like they have Brogdon. Brogdon just signed an extension. Bonus or Miles Turner or both or Karis LeVert too. Like I don't know what their plan is either.
Yeah, and that's a confusing thing with the Pacers is like with the Eastern Conference right now. I know they're 12-17. I mean, they're only a few games out of the 8th spot in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and like obviously that's probably not their goal, I would imagine. But I just don't understand selling so quickly after giving that extension to Brogdon. And then how does that make Brogdon feel as well when you're basically making everybody else available, including Sabonis? I really don't know what Indiana's doing there. And then, of course, I mentioned Boston, but a report came out that there's growing internal talks about, moving Jaylen Brown and separating Jason Tatum and Brown. What would you do if you're Boston right now? Because they're sitting at what? 14 or is that 11 and 14? I think they're 11 and 14 right now. Or I can't read my own handwriting there. Let me just look it up real quick. It's either 11 and 14 or 14 and 14. But the fact that these rumors are coming out and they came out earlier in the season, they're 14 and 14. So they don't even have a below 500 record, but these rumors are coming out. And there was rumors earlier in the season with Marcus Smart, him saying that they don't pass the ball. What are your thoughts on Boston? Like, do they need to sell? Like, do they need to buy? Like, what can they do?
I don't know, because like they're both so young. Like Tatum and Brown, guys you build around, and they're not even in the primes of their careers yet. I love turmoil in Boston. It makes me happy to see them struggle. It's one of the few joys in my life. To see them, it happened with the Sixers. They tried to break up Embiid and Simmons. They finally did, and then they just moved right over to Boston. Like,
they did.
Down with us. So funny to see that progression. But like, if I'm Boston, I'm doing everything I can to get help for them. I'm not moving them, unless they really can't coexist. But they've been on good teams, like Eastern Conference Finals caliber teams. You just need one more piece, and it's not Al Horford. It's not Marcus Smart or Peyton Pritchard. Like, they've missed on some draft picks. Their front office has been in a weird, like Dennis Schroeder is not going to do it. It's definitely strange to see the direction they've gone, but I wouldn't move either of those two players. I feel like they're way too good to like kind of give up on right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just too much upside there, especially when you're talking about obviously Tatum's a superstar, but when you're talking about Jaylen Brown, he still has like a level that he has not reached yet that he's capable of reaching, I believe. So I tend to agree with you. They need a quality big man, because when they get down into the thick of things against Giannis, against Embiid, people make the jokes about Horford. If that happens again this season, then we'll talk. What happened in that first matchup with Boston and how bad Embiid played. He was coming back from COVID. I'm not taking that. I'm not hearing that. So they need a guy that can battle down there in the post. Even a guy like Bam Adebayo could dominate a team like Boston like that. So definitely need to make some improvements there. But Boston looks pretty confused. The one last thing I want to ask you before I get you out of here, James, just regarding the Eastern Conference. So I'm looking at these specific teams like New York Knicks, the Atlanta Hawks, who were in the playoffs last year. Right now they're sitting outside looking in. Obviously, it's still very early in the season, but Atlanta's 13 and 14. New York Knicks are 12 and 15. Boston, once again, 14 and 14. They were another team in the playoffs last year, outside looking in. We have teams like Washington, Charlotte, and Chicago and Cleveland up in the top of the ranks. What I wanted to ask you, do you believe in Cleveland? Is this a real thing? Could they be a playoff team even without Colin Sexton, or is losing Colin Sexton made them better in a sense. Like, what are your thoughts on the Eastern Conference and those teams that I mentioned?
Yeah, I love Cleveland's like goofy lineup with 3 7-footers, and Evan Mobley is awesome. Evan Mobley is awesome. Really, really fun to watch.
Is he your rookie of the year?
Yeah, he should be right now. I think even regardless of numbers, I think that he just is
impact.
Very, very impactful young player. Colin Sexton, I think I think it sucks for him that he got hurt because it seems like they've kind of just moved on.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the 2 small guard lineup for them really ever worked, even with like Jared Allen at center. I like what they're building in terms of their foundation, but like I don't believe in them yet. I don't think they don't have the talent top to bottom on their roster. Chicago, I think they're contenders. They've got, prime scoring at all positions, all the major positions. I think that the Knicks and the Celtics will both be buyers at the deadline. To get like that one piece, and whether it is like a Miles Turner or a Sabonis, getting those into a Knicks uniform or whoever it is, like I guess Sabonis wouldn't work with Randall.
I know. I was just gonna say, imagine Sabonis and Julius Randle in the same squad. My goodness.
No, that would just be a lot of post up jumpers. Yeah, but I think it's a weird part of the year where like the good teams are getting back to being really good, and the bad teams are like. The next 2 weeks, I think, are very telling of what these middle of the road teams like. Charlotte's a good team, but like Charlotte's not going to be a good team in the playoffs. I don't think.
Right.
Atlanta will probably get back to being a good team for the playoffs. I think the Knicks are going to do everything they can right now to make strides towards being a good playoff team. But again, I don't think they have the star power yet. Julius Randle you can't sustain an offense off of Julius Randle like 25 shots a night. So it'll be seriously. So I think there's a lot of potential contenders, but I think that the top of the East is where you find like obviously Brooklyn, Milwaukee. Then I don't know if you have Chicago, and then like Miami's good, and I guess Philadelphia is down in that second tier.
Yeah. Right now, I have stars by all the teams that I think will like definitely make the playoffs, and I have Brooklyn, Chicago, Milwaukee, Miami, Philly, and then Atlanta. I do believe will get up in there as well. But what about Toronto? Just before we hop off, Toronto's not getting talked about a lot this year.
Yeah, I don't think so. I've always I wondered about Fred VanVleet too in a Ben trade.
Me too.
But Ben and like the most effective player in the league would just like break my brain. So like I like Toronto though. The fact that they like don't really even have a center that plays for them, they just like run a bunch of like really long athletic players and see what happens, and it's fun. I don't think they'll be maybe like in that bottom tier playoffs, maybe they'll get into a play-in, but like I don't see them any better than like a 7.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the key thing with Toronto, I think they do have a package that like interests me. Like if you threw Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby together in a deal, I would do that 100%. I know that's probably a little too much for Toronto. Maybe throw in another piece like a Thibault or something, or Maxey. I don't know how it would work, but that's something I would be interested in. But James, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, man. I've already took us over. Got a lot of good information out of you today, and it was certainly a pleasure, my man. And of course, if you ever want to come back on the show, ever want to come back on DSM Media, just reach out, man. You're a friend of mine, so you're always welcome. Before we exit, James, if you just want to share one more time where everybody can find you, your Twitter handle, and everything going forward.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun. I feel special being as a guest on the show, so I appreciate it. You just follow me at Twitter as JSBirrane17. All my written work and a podcast at the Liberty Line, and then also just check out the Pick Swap podcast with me and Sean. So that's all I got.
Man. Yeah, of course, James. And yeah, you should feel special. I mean, you are the special guest, James. I wanted to get you on my show. After I interacted with you, through Sean, I met you through Sean, and you definitely know your stuff. So everybody be sure to give James a follow on Twitter. Make sure you're following all of his content, checking him out. And I'm sure you will see James around a lot more in the future here. But that's going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks. Before I get out of here, I do want to just plug, make sure you're following DSM Media at DSM_media. If you're on Instagram, follow DSM Media at DSM do something major. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Scotty Drowned. And before we get out of here, you guys know that we are sponsored by Manscaped. DSM Media and Scotty Talks NBA are brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SCOTTY. That's SCOTTY at manscaped.com. Make sure that you are using that code throughout the holiday season. Get all your family members. It can be men or women. I'm sure women shave too. So, get all your utensils, get all your gear, and make sure your family members are taken care of this holiday season by using that code SCOTTY at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. For myself, for James, for DSM Media, that is going to be it for this episode. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. Peace.